What's going on, boxing fans? It's Julian Williams with The Distance. I'm here to give you another mailbag question. This actually wasn't necessarily a question. I was just asked by one of my subscribers to break down, the careers of Chavez Sr. and Chavez Jr. My personal opinion on it, and kind of break down both careers. Really, to be honest, there's really no comparison. I think the only thing that you can compare right now is the fact that both, I think Chavez Jr. is 42 fights in. Could be mistaken, about 42, 43 fights in. With this many fights for Chavez Jr., there's really, I can only name maybe one opponent that kind of stands out, and that's Matt Vonda. I thought defeated him in the first matchup, and if you look at as far as career, his first about 45 matchups or so, he didn't fight anybody that was really a big name opponent or anybody that really stood out. But see, with Chavez Sr. was, had a lot of KO streaks in his career. He had, power. He had a good chin. He's perhaps he's actually, to me, one of the greatest lightweights of all time. He fought some quality opposition in his career, and it's as simple as that. But with Chavez Jr., I think what Top Rank is doing, is building up on his name. The name Julio Cesar Chavez. They're building up on that name, and when you're building up on a name, a lot of people are gonna have these high expectations of you, and expect a lot more. But Chavez Jr., I don't know what his career will go to be honest, because see, Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. Fought, like I said earlier, fought some quality opposition, but he didn't. But he didn't fight quality opposition early in his career. Like a lot of people expect Chavez Jr. to. And most of Chavez Sr. He was about 90-0-1 till he lost to Frankie Randall. And I believe 1991, 1992, something like that. But it was in the 90s. But he was and he was about 45 fights in until he fought a named opponent, and he was fighting for like the WBC championship. So Chavez Sr. and Chavez Jr. were both brought up in different times as well, because right now in boxing, a lot of fighters, by the time they hit 40 fights, they're ready to retire. Chavez Jr. has more fights than a lot of the champions we have now. He has more fights than Amir Khan, Floyd Mayweather Jr. He has more fights than Kelly Pavlik, I believe Paul Williams, and I think he even has more fights than I'm trying to think. I think he has as many fights or more fights than Bernard Hopkins, I believe. I could be mistaken, but I just know that Chavez Jr. Should be brought up a lot differently. I think they really need to step up his competition. Because there's a lot of room for improvement, a lot of time for improvement, because he's only 23 years old, and he could still be broken down and taught a few things. And even if he does go in and lose, because a lot of people have the perception that if Chavez Jr. loses, then it's a big blow to his career. So that's what a lot of people believe. So I think the people over at Top Rank know that. So they're not gonna put him in the ring, with a guy that will probably be able to eat his lunch. But my thoughts kind of changed about Chavez Jr. when he fought Troy Rowland on the Pacquiao Cotto undercard, and he couldn't knock him out. because I thought Roland was a guy that was kind of made to be knocked out by Chavez Jr., but he couldn't knock him out, and Roland was punched out and everything, and he couldn't knock him out, so that said a lot. Because Chavez Sr. was knocking out guys, knocking out opponents and stuff like that. So, I think the difference between Chavez Sr. and Chavez Jr. is Chavez Sr. was tough as nails. No questions about it. He was just tough as nails, and and on top of that, he was knocking out everybody. He's going, because if you look at his record, he was knocking out a lot of people in like 1-2 rounds. And Chavez Jr. I think I really don't think takes as many risks as Chavez Sr. did. Doesn't really step in and get hit a lot or anything. Honestly, he looks a bit chinny. But we don't really know yet, because he hasn't really faced that level of opposition to make us question that, or make us determine whether he has a good chin or not. But the fact that he does have more fights than a lot of our champions, a lot of our young champions, and has more fights than some veterans, it kind of makes you wonder how Top Rank is going to build him up. It's like, what do they want him to have 90 fights, or try to beat his father's record or something until he gets defeated? I question that quite a bit. Because he is 23 years old. He has fought for about 5-6 years now, and he's slowly being brought along. But it wasn't until maybe 60-70 fights in until his father took on quality opponents, like Jose Luis Ramirez and Roger Mayweather and Frankie Randall, Pernell Whitaker. It wasn't until, because Chavez Sr. wasn't fighting quality opposition when he was 23. He fought in Mexico. That's where he was fighting. He was fighting in Mexico, and fighting people in Mexico who were really unnamed opponents, but he was fighting 3-4 times a year. So I think there's a year he fought 5 times a year. But so when you fight 4 times a year, and you kind of add it up for a while, then you're gonna have a lot of fights, definitely. So overall, both careers, I can't really compare them right now. I can compare, really what I can do is I can compare for the fact that Chavez Jr. is early in his career, and he has fought one okay opponent, Matt Vonda, and we'll see in 2010 what happens with Chavez Jr. But really, you can't really. The only comparison you can make right now is the fact that their first 40 fights in, they both didn't really face quality opponents. So that's really the only determining that you can make. But it's like there's different eras, different weight classes, stuff like that. It's hard to compare the eras and determine who's the better fighter or who had the better career, because they both have faced, both of them have faced different levels of opposition. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the careers of Chavez Sr. and Chavez Jr. I'm just kind of touching on both of them, both careers. I do think that Top Rank needs to step up its competition a lot better than they have the last few years. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I encourage anybody to send me a mailbag question to my inbox. No problem. I'll answer it on video, or I'll answer it with other questions in the mailbag, but I thought I'd touch on this for a whole video. But anyway, thanks for watching. That was The Distance. Peace.